Hi everybody, welcome back to another episode of my Dungeon Boss Face-Off series. With the immediate success of the last video with Valken versus Igorok, I thought it would be important to keep on going with a series that people actually want to see and actually want to weigh in on. So we're going to keep on with that theme here, and we're going to do another quick analysis here and compare two separate heroes. So remember, the goal of this particular series, the reason that it came up, was originally because of the Valken versus Igorok, and both of them basically do a freeze attack on their first attack. And so we wanted to compare like individuals in terms of which one is going to be better to use in most cases. So keeping with that theme, I want to try and make it a point to make sure that the comparisons that we're doing are legitimate comparisons. Now, I've gotten a lot of feedback on the first one in terms of all these different comparisons that we'd like to see, this person versus this person. I'm definitely going to take all of those to heart, and I will do as many of them as I can, time permitting. But I'm going to start out with this next one. We're going to keep two similar type of concepts again and see which one is going to be better for us. So what we're looking at today is going to be Ice Bloom versus Grog Gnog. So I kept with the same type of two water heroes, so that if we had the exact same runes, we don't have any type of skewed results in terms of maybe this person can have X number of runes in terms of power runes versus defense runes and such like that. Because they have the exact same rune loadout, we know that no matter what, we can make these people have the exact same loadout, and we can compare them pretty much straight down the list. So, with that said, let's jump in and take a look at our first couple of stats. So this is going to be still heavily number crunching based. There will be a little bit of bias in terms of the overall results, and ultimately this is meant to start a conversation. So let's start with Ice Bloom because she is epic. Now, first off, I'd like to point out, and this means probably absolutely nothing in terms of most people, but looking at Ice Bloom, no runes, she has a hero power, her roster power, if you will, of 6410. Compared to Grog Gnog, also 6 stars, with a bunch of decent runes on him, has a hero power of 5215. So already, the system itself thinks that Ice Bloom is probably better, which tells you how poor of an indication that roster power is. And so the roster power debate has gone on forever. So when you see those 35,000 power teams in PvP and you absolutely destroy them, it's likely because of skewed results like this. But that's just my 2 cents there. If you care about roster power, system kind of thinks that Ice Bloom is better. So we'll leave that as it is. But let's look at our first stat, is going to be attack. So we have a green calculated. Base is 2009, and then it has an epic. Her max epic is going to give 20% extra there. And so then when we compare to Grog Gnog, Grog Gnog also has a calculated value. His attack, 2083 to start with, plus he's get the large and in charge buff, which is 34% for me. If you look at the tooltip though, kind of interesting, large and in charge says 30%. What does that tell you? Take a quick guess right away. Bingo, it is the skill. So skill actually impacts his passive buffs, and if you don't believe me, I did test it. I pulled off his rune, and in the interest of showing it, take off this one here, skill dodge skill, remove, unequip, another 200,000. Stats. Attack, large and in charge, look at that, 33%. So we have one more actual physical evidence of something that skill affects, and it affects some of these passives. So you might want to take a look at some of your heroes who have passives and say, hey, maybe I could beef up some skill and get some extra little stat points here. But that being said, his base was 2083 and his extra buff was larger than Ice Bloom's buff. Attack is all Grog Gnog. And so even on top of that, we do need to consider one other thing as far as the attack goes, and that's the actual ability. Just because he has a higher attack doesn't necessarily mean his attack is higher. I mean, it obviously is, but looking at this one here, it doesn't give us a tooltip, so sorry we can't compare that. But looking at their first ability, which is the only one that I'm actually going to look at, Strike does 2708, massive amount of damage here. I crunched the numbers and looked at this, and strike is actually 100% of his basically pre-calculated attack. So this one here, when it was calculated, it was not the extra attack from 34%. It was actually the calculated value based on 30%. But it was 100% of his actual base attack plus that calculation. Compared to Ice Bloom. Ice Bloom, with her epicness and amazing roster power calculation, her attack was 2009 plus the 20%. Her ability, a paltry 803. I did the calculation on this one, turns out to be about 40% of her base attack. Now we also have to consider that she is also a caster, so she gets that mystical buff, but in the grand scheme of things, we're looking for guarantees across the board here. We're not looking for just attacking slows or just attacking tanks. So the fact that her first skill does less than half the damage, not to mention the cooldown, 9 turns, compared to Grog Gnog's 7 turns. So in terms of all-out attack power, Grog Gnog wins in several different categories there. Next up, stats-wise, defense. Ice Bloom is actually really great for defense. She has 1850, plus if you max her epic, you'll get 20%. That's going to bump that up to 2220. So 2200 defense base without any runes. That's pretty awesome. So as far as a PvP defense goes, she could carry you quite a ways. Grog Gnog, on the other hand, has base defense 2072, no buffs. So while his base is higher than Ice Bloom's by default, most people that are going to get Ice Bloom are probably going to invest a little bit in her epic. I mean, those people that are farming epics are likely upgrading them. I didn't upgrade it to the max. I kind of stopped doing that because it was a waste of my time. So if you don't do Ice Bloom's epic, obviously Grog Gnog wins there again. So all epics aside, Grog Gnog is basically 2 for 2. If we consider attack and defense, most people are going to go with that route. I'll skip skill for a second and just look at the max health, 6200 versus Ice Bloom. And the only reason I'd skip this one here is playing off of the attack concept. So looking at her, she's a caster, so you know she's a glass cannon, base of 4928. So Grog Gnog is much better in health, and then if we don't consider any of the actual epicness, attack, health, and defense, all of those all point towards Grog Gnog. Essentially, there's no reason to use Ice Bloom is what we're seeing here as far as the pattern goes. Skill, doesn't even really matter to look at skill. Skill is 2072 base. Grog Gnog is absolutely garbage with skill, unless you pour some runes into him, which I happen to do. I really honestly don't know why. I just put these on him. His skill was 2140, but his base is 1385, which is terrible. So we saw what skill can do with Grog Gnog with the large and in charge buff, that 33%, it could go up to 34%. I haven't looked to see how it actually scales with the values. That's a topic for another day. But in terms of comparison as far as stats go, Ice Bloom is severely lagging behind. Now, a year and a half ago, Ice Bloom was untouchable. She had some amazing things that nobody else could really duplicate. So then, skill-wise, we'll give that to Ice Bloom, but it really doesn't impact too much. I mean, obviously, we get the heals from her, but looking at that healing, remember, I like when we get guaranteed things. And where's our thing here? All allies heal a large amount when frozen. Why couldn't they just give us a number like 80% or 90%? The fact that it says a large amount makes me have to go out and do calculations and see how much they actually do heal. I like to see guarantees, and so that extra little piece there doesn't do much for me. As far as abilities go, Ice Bloom has a 9, she has a 5, and she has another 5. Grand total of 19 energy. Not the greatest in terms of heroes. As far as casters go, it's pretty much on par. You would have saw that when we looked at the caster priority guide. Grog Gnog, on the other hand, isn't substantially better in terms of abilities, but his abilities obviously play much more off of each other. We have 7, we have 4, and we have 6. So 17 compared to 19 in the grand scheme of things, especially PvP, not a big issue. On PvP defense, they're both going to get all 3 skills. It's just, not Yasmin, Ice Bloom is much more defensive. Grog Gnog is much more offensive. And that is because he is a warrior. He's going to do an attack. Ice Bloom, when she gets her caster buff, when she attacks with the mystical basically against tanks and slows, she will obviously fare a little bit better. But even then, based on Grog Gnog's first skill, much more damage, even with a huge boost to her attack. Ice Bloom's not going to be able to match that. So why did I choose to compare these two heroes when one of them is so clearly equal to the other? And that goes back to my initial opening statement and the premise for doing this. Both of these guys, they slow when they do their attacks. And so that was the original question that came up is, okay, Grog Gnog and Ice Bloom both actually slow their people down. Which one is actually going to be better to use? Because there is talk about Ice Bloom having some really high defense and being tough to kill. She can't be one-shot, except for maybe by Viperia, because the snakes hit twice. Because she has that undying heart, or whatever it's called. So people are thinking that maybe Ice Bloom's got something to look into, and she's epic, all that good stuff. So the issue that we're looking at, Strike. So it hits all these people for a lot of damage, and it reduces the speed, and it prevents critical. Some pretty great stuff. That's why everybody uses Grog Gnog and not Ice Bloom. What people fail to realize, and honestly, I admit to this one as well, I thought it was a guarantee as well. Remember I said I love guarantees? I looked at her tooltip again, and it says, ranged water has a chance to freeze. Okay, chance to freeze is great. Where's my slowing effect? And then I realized that was a stat, or a trait, 50% chance to slow when dealing damage. So really what you are doing is you are trying to, it's sort of a risk reward in terms of the ability to freeze and the possible ability to slow them down both. So you get a double advantage because the first turn is going to be skipped and then the second turn is going to be slowed. That's what makes Ice Bloom so dangerous. The downside is, though, with the current meta, there are way too many Shade teams. If you put Ice Bloom or Grog Gnog out there, a Shade team comes in, none of those dark people are getting frozen or slowed. So this is what made Ice Bloom so dangerous a year and a half ago, is because there's no way to stop that if she went first, with the exception of trying to silence her. And so if you brought in Torchy to silence or Indigo to silence, those opening heroes like Kira or sometimes Black Diamond would a lot of times kill them. And so it made Ice Bloom very formidable. So looking at this, so for the person who asked me about Ice Bloom versus Grog Gnog, it's very heavily skewed towards Grog Gnog. In terms of PvP defenses go, I would almost never suggest using Ice Bloom. I honestly can't think of a good situation where she would be better than Grog Gnog unless you have 6-star fully maxed epic Ice Bloom and you literally just got Grog Gnog. Grog Gnog is in the Heroic Portal all the time as a feature. Save up your times 10 summons and get him. He's far better than Ice Bloom is in terms of PvP defense. Because his trait, that slowdown and that reduce of critical, that's a guarantee every time. You don't have to hope that that chance to freeze kicks in. You don't have to hope that that 50% roll of the die kicks in for the slowness, just for Ice Bloom to be manageable. So in the interest of just sticking with the guarantees as a bonus, we're going to take a quick look at our other resident slow person. Not slow person, but slowing person, which is Senor Bovis El Toro, the bull. Now, we can't really technically compare him to Grog Gnog. We sort of can, but we can't. But he has a different, he's got a different rune loadout. So based on the rune loadout, we can't necessarily say all things equal, because they will never be all things equal because of these runes. So there's nothing we can do about that. But looking at his stats, I seem to have given Bulbous either more credit than he deserved in the past. Either that, or I seriously underestimated Grog Gnog, because his attack was actually lower than both of Ice Bloom and Grog Gnog. His base is 1946. He does get a 20% boost with his epic, which will take him up basically not equivalent to Ice Bloom, because she has a 20% boost as well, but it's decent. Defense-wise, 1600 base, also not very good. It's lower than both Grog Gnog and Ice Bloom. So he does get a 30% boost with Epic, but that just takes it up into manageable. 30% of 1600 is maybe another 500, puts him up to about 2000, which is still less than the other ones. Skill-wise, same thing, really, really, really low skill, just like Grog Gnog. Max health, nothing to write home about there either. So ultimately, Bolvis isn't any much better than the other ones either. And looking at his Stampede, 1460, I did the numbers on this one, turns out to be roughly about 60% of his base attack. So in most cases, Grog Gnog beats both of these guys hands down. Most of the time with Bolvis, your best bet of using Bolvis is honestly going to be on a strong nature team. You guys saw my nature video in terms of PvP and how amazing that can be if you use Rocky and Lily and start buffing these guys up. A nature team with Bolvis is equally as good because it, once he gets some plant growth on him, but still, maybe it'd be better for PvE rather than PvP. Bolvis in PvP is few and far in between. If you want to throw him on a solid beast team, it might work, but honestly, he doesn't have much place in PvP. In terms of PvP defense, I don't think I've seen him in many, many, many moons, whereas Grog Gnog I see pretty much every day. Ice Bloom, rarely ever see as well. So, we're looking at some subjective things. Like the subjective thing, I said it's basically weighing the gambit of do you want to try and get the double slow version from Ice Bloom. On defense, there's really nothing you can do about that. I mean, she's going to do that. If a dark team comes in with Shade, that's never going to work. If you want to use her on PvP offense, maybe you could try and get the double slow with both the freeze and the slow. Personally, I don't think it's worth the risk because in some cases it is also going to freeze your guys and you lose that bonus turn anyways. So in terms of which one of these to use, pretty much find any way you can to get Grog Gnog, level him up, get some good runes on him, beef up that large and in charge buff with some skill. So if you can't kill Grog Gnog in PvP because he's got high health, double check that skill and see if that's helping out. Same with Kozar. This is going to help buff Kozar as well. So my 2 cents, if I had to stamp my seal of approval, is ditch Ice Bloom regardless of the epic. If you're farming her epic just for the sake of roster power, abandon that train of thought. My guess is there'll be another blue hero soon enough to get. Maybe we'll even see Grog Gnog epic. So dump those other guys, focus on Grog Gnog, beef him up, make him unkillable, and then you'll be much, much better off. So, if you've already suggested a suggestion, I guess if you suggest a suggestion, it's kind of like the K2SO, taking the prisoners to imprison them in prison. That's from the Star Wars Rogue One. Anyways, if you suggested a suggestion for a particular comparison you'd like to see, definitely leave another one in the comments if you like, but also let me know why you'd like to see them compared. So the next one that I am going to do, just as a spoiler alert, if you are the one that suggested it, sorry I don't remember your name and I don't have it pulled up right now, but I will give you the credit for it, and that is going to be the Shade versus Shadowblade. So that is going to be the next one I do. I don't have an estimated date on it yet, but it will be coming soon. I'm going to try and do as many of these as possible to keep up with the demand, because that is what people want to see. So let me know what you'd like to see next and why, and then I will certainly whip up the video for you and let you know my insight, and we can have a discussion on it. So until next time, thanks again for watching, and we will see you again. Thank you so much for watching this video and supporting my channel. If you like this video, please show your continued support by hitting that like button, and be sure to check out both my YouTube channels for new content all the time. And always remember, peace is a lie, there's only passion. We'll see you next time.